Hey everyone, welcome to session 5. It's Wednesday, April 26th, a few minutes after 6 p.m. Central Time. We do have a special guest to kick off this session. We have Guillermo Aguilar. I'm going to let him introduce himself. He's going to talk for probably like 10 or 15 minutes or so about what it's like after you apply for Code Platoon, and then have any like a Q&A session for any questions that any of the students have. So without further ado, Guillermo, if you want to kick it off.
Thank you so much, Charles. Okay, so I just want to go over just the application process and just to give you some like helpful hints and pieces of advice for when you go through the Code Platoon application process. So the application process on the website, it's technically 2 parts, but I'm going to say it's 4 parts, and I'm going to give you the 4 parts now. So the Code Platoon application really is 4 parts. The first part is just basic personal info and like service details and what cohort you're applying to. So really basic stuff. You can fill it out less than 10 minutes. That's part one. Part two of the application is a little bit more involved. You're asked to create a YouTube video that answers a handful of questions. And in that video, you're also asked to kind of go over one of your application CoderBite challenges in detail and how you solved it. So part two is a lot more involved. Now, the third part of the application is a series of 12 CoderBite challenges. And there is a set minimum that a number of points that you need to get from those 12 CoderBite challenges. I can't give you what the minimum is just because that's our policy, but you need to try to get as many points as possible on all 12 of the challenges until you pass that threshold to be admitted to our program. And then the last thing that you actually don't find out until after you've already been accepted to the program is you need to pass a live technical assessment with one of our instructors. But since you guys are here now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that after you get accepted, after you receive the pre-work, the last thing you need to do outside of completing the pre-work before the start of your respective cohort is pass a live technical assessment. And that's really just something that Code Platoon does to vet our students to make sure that you can kind of somewhat know how to code before coming to our immersive program with the immersion of AI tools and a lot of things you can use to cheat on your application. We want to make sure that everyone that is coming to our program is set up to be successful. So that's the live technical assessment. It's pretty straightforward. Typically runs, 40, well, it typically runs like 25 minutes to an hour, depending on how fast you are on the challenges. I do a lot of those technicals. If you know Francisco, who teaches the other intro course, he does a lot of those technicals. So you'll probably get one of us. So the upcoming cohorts, which is probably part of the reason why you're in this intro course, the upcoming full-time cohort is Victor, and that has a start date at October 2nd. Now, the fall cohort, I'm a little biased to that I really like. And the reason why I like the fall cohort a lot is because most of our funding and most of our students that go through our program, they go through the vet tech program. And as you already know, the fiscal year starts on October 1st. So having a cohort that starts on October 2nd is really, really good because you're almost assured the funding to go through our program. So typically at the end of the year and for the summer cohorts, we sometimes vet tech gets really close to running out of funding. And in the 15 months that I've been here, it's never ran out until this year. It officially ran out. So we have a handful of students trying to go to our upcoming uniform platoon that starts in June that we're going to try to get scholarships for because vet tech funding did run out. So big fan of the fall cohort, the October cohort, simply because it's a new fiscal year. The funds for vet tech are replenished and you're almost guaranteed to get funded to go through our program. And the next full-time cohort is Whiskey with a start date of January 29th. Also a really good cohort, simply because it's still early off in the year. There's going to be funding if you go through vet tech. So those are the full-time cohorts coming up. And then the next evening and weekend cohort doesn't start until January 8th of 2024. That's because we have an evening and weekend cohort starting at the end of next month. So that's for our full stack program. And then we also have a DevOps program that's set to begin August 28th with a application deadline of next month, May 21st, although that's going to be extended. If you have questions about, full stack versus DevOps, you can ask at the end of this real spiel. The next thing I want to talk about is just some common mistakes that I see on the apps. The most common mistake that I see on the application is you don't complete enough of the code right challenges or get enough of the points. So then you'll get a courtesy email from me saying, hey, you haven't met the minimum requirement. And then like 7 times out of 10, I get an email back, what's the minimum? And then I email them back the same copy and pasting that I always send them. I can't tell you the minimum, you just haven't met it. So make sure to really get as many of the points as possible on all the Coderbyte challenges, all 12, at least attempt them. I have students that won't attend half of them. So it's really difficult to get the minimum if you only attempted 6 of the 12 problems, right? Even if you don't get all the test cases, pick up a couple points on all of them, you should be able to get enough points to pass the threshold. The second most common mistake on the application that I see is you'll have your YouTube video, but it'll be listed as private. So then I have to email you, be like, hey, it's cool if it's unlisted and we prefer that your YouTube video is unlisted, but it still needs to be public and accessible to the person that has your link. So make sure that it is unlisted, but still public so I can watch it or whoever's evaluating your application. So that's the second most common mistake that I see. The third most common mistake that I see is applying super, super late. Like people will apply like literally 10 minutes before the deadline. And if you don't meet the minimum requirements on your first submission, you don't get a courtesy email from me saying, hey, your YouTube video link doesn't work. Hey, you didn't answer some of these questions. Or hey, you didn't meet the minimum number of points in your Coderbyte challenges to be accepted. And since you wait to the very end, our turnaround time is really, really short. So I pretty much need to auto reject you. And you get no courtesy email. So do not wait to the very end to apply. Apply early, just in case there's something wrong with your application. You'll get a courtesy email from me saying, hey, you're missing X to be accepted. So that's the third most common mistake that I see. And then the fourth most common mistake that I see, and this is the last one, is underestimating how long it's going to take to learn how to code, especially if you're coming from a non-technical background. And I always put that caveat on there because most of the people that come to Code Platoon come from non-technical backgrounds. I would hate to speculate on the percentage, but the number is really, really high. You could say it's the lion's share of the people that come to Code Platoon, right? They have very little technical experience, and that's okay. Just don't underestimate how long it's going to take to learn basic programming fundamentals. So those are just some common mistakes on the app that you want to avoid. And then the last thing that I have for you is just some important reminders to keep in mind. I just have 2. The first one, and something that kind of is a pet peeve of mine, in people's application, or sometimes I'll get a lot of these emails, they'll say that on the application, the Coderbyte challenges are wrong, and they're definitely not wrong. They've never been wrong. But you'd be surprised how many emails or how many comments I get in people's applications saying, hey, your application is broken, your Coderbyte challenges are broken. And they are definitely not. Read the challenge again and ask us any questions you might have, but they did not make a mistake. So I always bring that up just because it's so common, and I'm not quite sure why. And then the second thing that I want to leave you with before I open it up for questions is when you're applying and you're going through this journey that is long, don't be intimidated by anyone that has like a CS degree or has, X number of years of IT experience. I've come to realize, and Charles could probably back this up, that none of that really matters. It really just comes down to the individual, right? If you're really hardworking and really focused and put in a lot of time, you're going to be good at programming, just like you could have been good at nursing or good at being a teacher or good at being a finance manager. You're going to be a good software engineer, right? If you put in the work and are smart and driven, you're going to be fine. So all those accolades, when people wave their CS degrees or their IT experience, like you'd be surprised the number of people that I'll read because I read off everyone's application, right? X number of IT years of experience. I don't know what they did in IT, but they definitely can't code. I know that. So do not be intimidated, right? You can be as good, if not better, than any of them. That's all I have, Charles. Hey man, I killed it right there. I was trying to be super professional and I did it.
Nice job. Does anyone have any questions for Guillermo? And I'm going to leave a long, awkward pause because the tradition is that you'll wait till he leaves and then you'll have questions for him and you'll ask me and I won't know and then I'll have to ask him. So if anyone's anything about applying to Code Platoon, the pre-work, questions about what the application's like, what we can and can't do with the application questions, feel free to throw them out there.
I have one. Just regarding the difference between the the full stack and the DevOps. You said if we had questions about it at the end, we could ask. So, yeah, are you able to explain anything about the DevOps process and how that might differ?
I'm going to give a kind of a gross oversimplification of the two, if that's okay. And, for people just starting out in dev work, I think it's pretty good. And we can just leave it at that. When you're a full stack developer or you're, front end or back end, you're building applications. When you're more DevOps, you're more or less working on CI/CD and integration stuff. I typically, and this is my take, Charles can chime in on this. My take is I think you should really learn how to build stuff first before you jump into DevOps. To me, going straight into DevOps without minimum like a lot of years of IT experience or like engineering experience, to me is pretty difficult. And not to say that it's harder, it's just more abstract, and I feel like the jump is bigger. Charles, you have anything else on that?
Well, one, I'll just clarify that. So CI/CD is continuous integration, continuous delivery, which is basically what all software projects strive to work towards, so that someone who is in DevOps is basically helping to facilitate that we can update code and update the program on a continuous basis, or as close as we can get to that as possible. Go back to like the 1990s or 1980s, waterfall production was kind of the way things happened, where basically you went out, you talked to your clients, you figured out what they needed, you said okay, and then you gave it to the designers designed the software developers wrote it. Maybe this was a 6-month or year-long process, and it was just one thing right after the other, and then at the end of it, you put your software out in the market. You didn't ask anyone for any feedback before you did that. And then your customers started using it, and then they started complaining to you, and you started taking notes, and then you started working on 2.0. And with CI/CD, someone that's working on the DevOps side is basically facilitating that.
Very
What's
close.
that? Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was just speaking about how my headphones weren't working. I'm sorry, but
No
I can hear
problem.
you. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Yeah, so it's just a facilitated modern software development. Is basically that we can continuously do all of those things, talk to the client, get requirements, do designs, write code in quicker cycles. And without modern DevOps, we're not able to deliver on that. And also, Ty, I do want to clarify too, and Guillermo, with this, is there any difference in the application process between the two programs? Or is it the same coder byte challenges?
Same quarter byte challenges, except if you apply to DevOps, that's a great question. You have to do it in Python because Python is heavily used in scripting for DevOps, and JavaScript really isn't, even though you're not going to get away from JavaScript completely if you're a DevOps engineer, because it's so, I don't know, entrenched in web dev that you're going to see it and mess with it, at least a little bit. So that's one of the differences. And also, you have to get your AWS Cloud Practitioner before coming to the DevOps program as well. So those are the only two slight differences. And the admissions bar tends to be a little higher for the DevOps program. I don't want to say it's a little harder, but you need a little bit more experience in a technical field for you to jump straight into DevOps. And actually, there's a couple people in our current cohort that do have a lot of IT experience, and they're going straight into DevOps. And when I read their application, in my head, I'm thinking, this makes perfect sense why you're doing this. But if I see someone that struggles at, even writing the simplest Python code, and they want to jump straight into the DevOps cohort, I try to encourage them to maybe rethink that and maybe come to the full stack immersive first.
So I have a question. So are you saying that I would need an AWS cert prior to applying, or is it once I've applied and have been accepted, I would work on my AWS cert? And
Once
then
you've been accepted, you apply for it, and then you fill out a form, and then Code Platoon reimburse you the application fee.
okay, awesome. And then as long as someone is able to both attain the AWS cert and meet the coding like challenges in Python, are you looking for a certain level of experience, or do you welcome whoever can like actually achieve enough points on the application process?
Whoever can achieve enough points, we take pretty much anyone that can meet those minimum requirements. Again, Platoon tries to help as many veterans as possible. So we're not going to be the ones to stop you. That's for sure.
Got you. Thank you for explaining that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to be fair, like, and I think I mentioned this like on the first night of class. Like, I mean, we've had people that have gone through the software engineering portion and they've gone straight into DevOps roles, and like, I don't want to discourage you. Like, if you want to do DevOps and you're interested in that type of work, then go for it. It may be a little bit harder if you don't have the programming background, but I know, Ty, you've talked about like you've already had like some exposure to like Java and a couple of different programming languages. So you're probably like, I wouldn't sweat going straight into the DevOps program at that point. But the other side of it too is like DevOps is super in demand. And even if you were to go through the engineering program and you get your first job and you even give a hint that you're interested in DevOps, like they're going to shove you on a DevOps team because they need people like crazy to do DevOps right now. Like at my work, we've got 116 engineers. If anyone even looks like they're remotely interested in DevOps, you're doing DevOps. So
That's also great to know. Thank you.
So when you land your first gig, and just because you go through one program or the other, doesn't mean that that's going to be your career forever, right? It's not. Once you land your first gig, it's gonna depend where you land, right? If you land in a dev role, if you land in a DevOps role, if you land at a big company, if you land at a small company, if you land at a small company, guess what? You're building the app and you're deploying it. You're a full stack engineer and you're a DevOps engineer, right? And now, if you end up in like in a big mid-size or a bigger company, then they have designated, dev teams, designated DevOps teams, and they're separate. But again, it really just depends on, what your initial inclination is, and what kind of company or what kind of first job you get. And just because you get one right now doesn't mean you won't get another one later on, doing something slightly different.
any other questions for Guillermo?
Actually, I have one. Just wondering about the pre-work before the cohort. Besides what you guys kind of I guess require for pre-work before the cohort, is there anything extra? If there's time, hey, maybe I also check this out or check that out. Is there anything else actually that you recommend?
So in the order that I recommend, I guess in terms of importance, this is what I always tell people. Before coming to our program, be proficient, try to be as proficient as you can be in JavaScript and Python. And typically most of the students that we get are not quite there on either of those two, so they more or less stop right there. But if you can get that out of the way, the next thing that I recommend is something that I've been on 4 different teams in my very short career, and the 2 things that have transcended all 4 teams, Linux commands and Git and GitHub. If you're good at those 2 things, man, you're a step above the next junior for sure. And learn the terminal like the back of your hand. My girlfriend never learned the terminal, so she works for GM and uses their little GUI on Azure. And every time she gets stuck, she's like, hey, can you help me? And I always get her unstuck. Why? Because I had some guy on the internet said, hey, man, you need to learn Git and GitHub in the terminal really well, and you're going to do great. And I took this random stranger's advice to heart and got good at it. And man, that's been really, really helpful. Also, when you get jammed up at work, no one's going to like jump into your Zoom and like have you click through stuff. They're going to Slack you a terminal command, and then they're going to be like, figure it out. And then you're going to parse out the terminal command, figure out what each thing says. You're going to get unstuck, and then you're going to continue mission.
Awesome. Great.
So,
That's actually kind of hoping what I was hoping you're going to say, because those are some things that I'd kind of had targeted as learning before I started cohort. So yeah, awesome. Thank you.
next hot tip. And if you have time, this is a lot of time, so no one's going to have time to skip the cloud practitioner. Go straight to the SSA. It'll teach you a lot about networking stuff that I wish that before I had gone to my first job, had I taken the SSA, I would have been better off, not because of learning AWS services, just because of learning all the concepts in the SSA, right? Things like, subnets, private networks, a lot of networking stuff, CIDR ranges, global tables, MySQL to NoSQL databases, all that stuff would have been super valuable to me before I went to my first job. And I learned it as I was training for the SSA certification. And here's the thing, the AWS services don't really matter. The concepts matter, because in AWS, we have CloudFormation, but the third party is just Terraform. They do the exact same thing, and they're all YAML templates, right? So if you learn it through studying the SSA cert, and you end up on someone that uses GCP or they use Azure or whatever cloud service, it doesn't matter. The idea is the same. The template markups are the same, just they call them different things. So hot tip,
SSA?
the Solutions Architect Associate on AWS. That I recommend to anyone that wants to be a dev. I learned so much taking that cert. And again, it's not about the cert, because the certs don't matter. It's what you are learning in the process of getting this cert. So there's only 4 of you here. You got some excellent advice right there, guys. I wish I would have known all of that before.
So wait, so you're saying in addition to getting the cloud practitioner, also study and train for the solutions architect?
It depends. It depends. If you're going to DevOps, obviously you need a cloud practitioner, but actually you could just say, hey, I got the SSA, and then we'll waive the CP requirement. I did it for one person in this last cohort. But
So
again, the SSA is a lot more time intensive, right? Like it's a lot harder.
For sure, but so people can go straight for that one.
You can. Again, that's a very aggressive approach to your career. But if you had time to kill and needed to learn a lot of stuff that would be useful later, those 3 things that I told you, JavaScript, Python, Linux, Git, and GitHub, and the SSA, would be clutch.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Great, awesome. Actually, just let everybody know, Amazon, they teach free classes all the time on web services. I live here in Arlington, like 2 minutes from the Amazon area, and
HQ2.
I went to a free cloud practitioner course, and it was awesome. So, but you can do it remotely or in person.
Wait, but they do live courses for free?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. I know about their Twitch courses, but I didn't know that they did.
Yeah, the Amazon gives free education to get their hooks into you, so that you'll pay for AWS. And which is very common. Like GitHub does the same thing, right? GitHub's owned by Microsoft. They bought them for a couple $2 billion a few years back, right? And so there is a ton of free education in this industry, with the caveat that they're trying to educate you on their platform, because that's how they make revenue.
Right.
And also, just to make sure that we're clear, the Solutions Architect Associate is the one that you're looking for, because the Solutions Architect, I think, has a minimum work experience of 5 or 6 years, and that one's the master's level. The Solutions Architect is the bachelor's, and then Cloud Practitioner is basically AWS indoctrination. It's why we should all love Jeff Bezos and the top 30 services that at AWS. What does S3 do, and what does Cloud Compute do? All these different things. And so the Cloud Practitioner, you can honestly pass with probably a week or 2 of minimal studying if you're a good multiple guest test taker. The Solutions Architect, you actually have to understand terminology and methodologies of why you would move around in these different services. So it is a fairly large step up.
Got you. But the I'm sorry. Yeah, the SAA is easier than the essay like professional, right?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
significantly.
significantly. Yeah. The
Okay.
professional exams are like really hard because they're the type of test where there's like 5 answer choices and 3 of them are right. So you got to pick all 3 of the right answers. It's not just you just guess one. They're a lot harder.
And you're conceptually, it's just like software development, right? Like the associate level, like you're learning functional programming, you're learning what a service does and how it works. At the professional level, you're looking at it like an architect and why and where software services scale and when to change between services and how do you set up entire basically layouts of virtual private clients and multi-networks, and like you have to know significantly more to be able to pass that test.
Got you.
And with any of these tests, again, it's great to be ambitious and get out there and do it, but I've often found that tests like these are not like riding a bike. If you don't use the information, you forget it. So if you're going to go for that professional level and try and knock it out of the park, but then you get a job as an entry-level DevOps person where you're not actually working with any of that stuff, by the time you've got that 5 or 10 years worth of experience, you're going to end up having to relearn all of that stuff anyways. Versus like going for that associate level, honestly, with no experience, a lot of it is not going to make any sense to you until you can get the good thing is that you can get free AWS accounts for like 6 months or a year or whatever, where even if it's not free, like I mean, we're talking like a API query is like 2/millionths of a penny, right? So like, I mean, you can do tens of thousands of queries a month and your bill will be 30 or 40 cents. But like getting in there and doing the practical application is what reinforces it. So like without having the ability to go out there and actually do this stuff on a daily basis, like just taking the test could end up being a lot of lost knowledge by the time you get there.
So for the AWS free accounts, when I was doing the fintech stuff, we had to get one. And generally, it's what you're saying. It's pretty much 100% free. There are some caveats. And I guess the piece to warn everybody is if you're doing some operation with that account, there are formal ways to turn off the operation you're working on. Because if you log out without turning it off, it'll keep running and then you'll pass your allowed free amount. And then the final thing is there's a double, triple security setup option beyond just a simple password. And you absolutely want to use that because the AWS free accounts are rife with hackers stealing it, because when you open that account, it's on your credit card. And the next time you log in, you're going to find out your account just billed you $1,000 because somebody used your free time and the rest of your credit card. So that's the other warning.
Yep, which that's DevOps. That's setting up all of this stuff, and that is honestly the like if you were to open up an AWS free account, I would highly recommend at that point probably starting to study for the associate solutions architect, and because it walks you through how to protect your root account, how to set up user permissions, like right from the very first chapter. And because free account or not free account, there are bots. And so if anyone has like, there's friendly bots and there's bad bots. Like GitHub, whenever you have a security issue, like there's a thing called Dependabot that is constantly searching GitHub for code bases with security issues, and it warns you. It'll send you an email saying, hey, just so you know that you've got a Django project that uses this dependency, and this dependency has a security vulnerability, so we recommend that you upgrade the version. At the AWS level, there are hackers out there that have bots scanning for your secret keys. So basically your API token, and you have a public API token, which is how people interact with you. And you have a private API token, and people will push that up and expose it. And as soon as you expose it, I mean, basically within them finding it and stealing your API key, within minutes, they can ring up thousands of dollars worth of debt that you are legally responsible for, because you can plug it into the AWS super high-end AI machine learning server that's burning through $50 a minute worth of computing horsepower. And by the time your credit card company catches on, you're 5, 10, 20 grand in the hole. And I say that specifically to scare you, that like some of this stuff is scary. I mean, like your secret keys hooked to your credit card. I mean, it's the same thing as posting a picture of your credit card on Reddit or like a open Facebook account. There's absolutely no difference to it. And the exact same consequences can happen. So it is not it's not a game.
And what do you recommend doing in order to like learn how to set this stuff up properly?
Read how to operate the machine before you turn it on. Basically the same thing you do with like heavy equipment or a gun or getting behind the wheel of a car. Like again, the associate so the associate level of the solutions architect shows you how to set up a basic AWS environment. And so if you're going to go to AWS, even like if you don't plan on going to Code Platoon for either program, and you're just like, hey, I'm going to write my own thing and I'm going to deploy it on AWS, and even if you never get the cert, right, and take the test, like just reading through it and having a basic familiarization of how not to go out there and get blown up immediately is a good idea. And I mean, it happens. I mean, look at who was the right wing social media, Parler, right? That was a big social media company, like several devs, whatever. They did not protect their AWS data API, which allowed hackers to basically download all of their user data on an unmetered connection, and the more bandwidth you use, the more expensive it gets. So not only did they cough up all of their user data, they got charged a ton of money to do it because someone came in and said, unmetered, give it to me all as quickly as possible. And next thing you know, like your entire code base is being exported on like a 1 gigabyte or 1 terabyte data connection. And it cost you 25 grand for the honor of basically going out of business. So it happens, and it happens to bigger companies. It happened even to the military. If anyone saw a couple of weeks ago, they just found a non-password protected JSOC. So the special op, the tier 1 guys, like the baddest guys on the face of the planet, had all of their information on a non-encrypted server, no password, no login. If you knew the IP, you could start downloading documents from JSOC, right? And that's DevOps. Like that's why we need more DevOps engineers, is we need people to set those things up without doing stuff like that.
But I would say kind of what Charles was saying, because this is what we were taught and kind of walked through, and I can't remember exactly the whole process because I did it months ago. But it was required for us for the class to have an AWS free account in order to complete the challenges and coursework. But I will tell you, if you're opening a free account and all you do is a single password in your setup, you're wrong. So you might check a YouTube video that not necessarily as definitive, but there's like a 3-layer where you do your basic password and then you wrap that into another management password. And this is all through the Amazon website. So it's like a 2 or 3 step, and then you always log in through that management site, not your personal. So you're not freeing it up.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so they probably go over it. I'm sure there's a YouTube video or tutorial that shows, because there's always people talking about the security of different things, whether it's cryptocurrency or anything else. So I'm sure there's probably a YouTube vid that'll go through how to set up a secure free trial account with AWS.
There is. They'll teach you how to do multi-factor authentication and everything. So it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and just the AWS .amazon.com learn, right? You can start to get into some of the things. They offer tons of free training. The exams cost money. I know, as Guillermo said, like if you're going for the DevOps route, or even if you're going for the full stack route, you get a voucher for the cloud practitioner, but you don't have to take it, but it's recommended versus like the DevOps one. It sounds like it's required before you start class. So you'll get some familiarity to it. And I also, correct me if I'm wrong, since Heroku is no longer free, I believe even the full stack immersive is now deploying their projects on AWS.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So either route you go, you're going to get some exposure to it. And AWS is the whale in the pond. I mean, there's other solutions out there. I mean, Google, Firebase, or the cloud solutions, and then like Microsoft Azure are both very large competitors. And then there's dozens of smaller ones out there. But AWS is the big boy. I can only imagine what percentage of cloud computing power in the world is stationed at AWS at this point.
Any other questions, guys? I am an alum. I graduated Papa. Charles, where were you? India?
Hotel.
That's right.
I'm old. I work with a guy that graduated in Bravo.
Oof. Nice.
Yeah. Everybody's a boot to somebody.
Jesse, you've been kind of quiet. No questions, sir?
No, I'm here just making sure my stuff is working. I'm actually signed up for uniform, so I already did all the stuff. I should have done the intro to coding like months ago, but just brushing up on my JavaScript right before it starts.
Gotcha. I gotcha. Cool. Chad, anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
For sure. All right, Charles.
Thanks again. I'll see you next cohort.
Yeah, like always, man. Thank you for having me, guys. Best of luck. Do your application early.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Yeah, so I think any exposure you can get to AWS is really good. And he hit on some big ones. Learning the terminal and learning Git. We kind of talked about that. I think I dropped a link about the Git like interactive tutorial. That was the pink screen. Learning those things. And also I did want to throw out to you, so we do post the videos on YouTube. I think I had a couple of people say they were going to do it and no one did it. And so I had code Platoon. They should be posted up there now. Playlist. Okay, I don't think they've put it into a group, but I saw at least one of the videos have been uploaded. But you do also have access to the videos for the intro to coding for Python, which was taught last month. So for those of you that are interested in upskilling in Python, again, it's going to be very similar. It's taught by Francisco Avila, who is another instructor. You're going to see some of the same concepts. The slide deck's very similar, if not identical. It's just rewritten for usage in Python. And I've not sat in on one of Francisco's classes, so I'm not familiar with his teaching style, like how similar or different it is from mine. But if you do want exposure to this in Python, it is available like pre-recorded on the Code Platoon YouTube channel. So for like Ty, like for you, like if you need more exposure for the DevOps application, or anyone else that wants to get that Python exposure, it's right here as well. All right.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Okay, so let's see here. We've got session 5, and this is going to be a short slide portion here. We've just got to cover scope tonight. And we've already kind of covered that in class where we've talked about the difference between global scope and local scope. So any variable declared outside of a function is going to be in the global scope. You can access these variables anywhere in the program. And local scope, anything defined inside of a function is only accessible to that function and any functions or blocks of code inside it. Right, so scope is limiting. So if we say, right, so this function is calling on the variable name, which is out at the global scope so it can see it. So notice I didn't feed it in as a parameter. It just recognizes it. Now, this, it would be like, this is legal. You can do it. It works. This is bad code right here. You don't want to do this. You don't want a lot of things sitting out at the global scope because more things can basically interact with it, change it, modify it, mutate it, delete it, whatever. And so we want to always try and keep scope to the smallest scope possible. It's basically, it's just like in security or anything else, it's least privileges. So we want to, the only things that should know about, or basically everything should know as little as possible about everything else in the program. And so right now, this function knows about this variable, and we don't want that, right? We want to have a parameter called name, and then we want to feed it in down here, right? And so this is a better way of doing this, right? So this is limiting the scope of what's going on here. And it's the same thing. Now that name is only inside of the function, it's been moved to the local scope of that function. If I say console.log name here, when I'm going to get an error message, right, it's going to say that, well, so the name is deprecated because it's probably means something, but it's also, its name is not defined, right? So name is no longer out at the global scope. Can't see it. It's only in here. And so this is the local scope of the function. And we kind of talked about this, like if we wrote a, a for loop, right? And I said, let I equal 0. So we are declaring a variable I right here, which is going to be our iterator. It's where we start counting, I less than 10 and I plus plus, right? So I can console.log I in here because I is within the local scope of this block of code. So this for loop is basically just a like predefined function that JavaScript knows about. It recognizes this format that you're going to be writing a loop, but at the end of the day, it's still a function underneath the hood of JavaScript. And so I can console.log as I count here, but if I try and console.log I outside of the local scope of that for block, even though I'm inside the function, I'll still get an error message. Right? Oh. Do this. Right? So we hit the I here 10 times, and then we try and hit the I outside of there, and it says I is not defined, right? So I is within the local scope of the loop, it is not within the scope of the function. Name is within the local scope of the function, and is not out at the global scope where it can be used anywhere. Right, and that's all scope is just saying where can you and can you not access this information from. All right, and so yeah, here's an example of it we talked about, right? So exact same thing, name Tom, we can console.log it. We've got it in here, and local scope age is only inside the function. If I were to try and console.log it outside the function, it won't do anything. Hoisting is old JavaScript. So hoisting in JavaScript is a mechanism where variables and function declarations are moved to the top of their scope before code execution. This only works with var. It does not work with const and let. All right. And so that's why I say it's old JavaScript. So if I do something like this, and I say var equals, or I'm sorry, var name equals Charles, and if I do console.log Charles, I'm sorry, name, all right, there's my name, and if I take it and I put it up here, I believe it should still work for me. Nope, I get undefined. I think that's something within Replit. It doesn't, again, in the environment, it doesn't hoist as much. So that's why I say, like, I wouldn't worry too much about it. And because one, you shouldn't really be using var anymore. Like everything should be letter const, and it definitely doesn't work when you're doing it with letter const. The hoisting only happens with var. All right, and that is it for the slides for tonight. So it's 6:53, 6:54. Does anyone have any questions for me on scope or anything else that you want to ask questions about? We'll answer questions. We'll take a quick break here, then we'll come back and then we'll get into challenges for the evening.
So basically, hoisting is an interesting kind of historical topic, but it's really not good form.
I wouldn't count on it, basically. And it seems like every other time I try it, it works for me. Let me try this in here.
Do you need to, because the one on the right is where it apparently works. The one on the left, it functioned exactly as you expected it to function when you did it. The one on the right is when it hoists.
Right, and it's
so it may work if you do it the way they did it on the right.
yeah, let me just grab this here real quick. Well, and it's not that it's it's like if we do var name, right, we should get the same thing, right? So we don't need to redeclare it down here, we get it here. All right, so we still get the undefined. So in the console.log name, it should say Charles after the fact because it's been declared below it. And I could have swore that at one point, if you did it, it would still show it, like it would hoist it above it. And it's giving it undefined, which is what I'm seeing in the slide. So yeah, I'm probably thinking about it the wrong way. All right, so we've got output undefined, this, And it's basically saying this is what's happening, right? Is like we're doing it, and then we're doing the instantiation or the declaration, and then we're assigning the value. So this is basically what's happening with this in reality. And what it's saying is you're getting an undefined because it's looking at it as an undefined variable instead of just throwing an error message saying that it's not defined at all. Which is, so I mean, that was where I was confusing myself the way I was looking at it. Right. So because if we get rid of this altogether, right, we'll get name is not defined. And when we do it this way, we get an undefined. So it knows that it sees that there's a var, but it's basically just this part is getting hoisted above the console.log. Right. And then this looks like this. And so, and I think if we do let, I can't remember if it'll do the same thing or if it'll throw. Oh, what happened? Sorry. Reset. All right, so let will handle it the same way, I believe. And then I think const, if that will do it or not. All right, and so const won't let you do it. So missing initializer. And so that's basically hoisting. But again, it's not a concept that you'll run into anything that you'll need as far as getting into code Platoon.
No, it's something that if you're repairing legacy code, you might see some crap like that you have to clean up.
Right. Yep, for sure. So any other questions in there? And thanks for pointing that out. Okay, so it's 6:58. I'm gonna go ahead, pause the recording here. All right, so welcome back from the break, and we finished with the caffeine challenge on Monday. We're done with the slides for today, so we're going to go ahead and get into it with one of the challenges. Now, did you want me to lead the class on a challenge and then do a challenge where we break into groups, or you guys want to jump right into a group challenge?
My vote is just the way you've been doing it. Do what challenge, and then we just start jumping in. But again, that's one vote.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Cool. So let's go ahead. Can I go to the bar is pretty easy. Is basically if you're 21 or not. So it's just like a simple if statement. Bum, bum, bum. Has anyone in class already solved FizzBuzz?
I've solved it before.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
All right. And let's see here. So let's go. I'll just take a look at rivers here. And again, this most of these conditional logic ones are pretty straightforward, but I'm happy to navigate through these ones. And then we'll jump into, after I tackle this one, is just kind of like a primer and a reminder for control flow. I'll probably have the class jump into the camel case one because that's going to be some control flow with loops. So that challenge will be a little bit more of a stretch. It won't be boring. All right. So let me go ahead and copy this. Hold up. Prep here. Ghostwriter. Run it real quick. Should get 4 falses, and we do. All right. So to solve this challenge, we need to write a method that takes in a river velocity as an integer and a boat type as a string. Rowboats can only navigate in waters under 3 miles per hour, otherwise they'd crash. Similarly, sailboats can navigate under 7 miles per hour, and ships can navigate under 15 miles per hour. Return whether the input boat can navigate given the river velocity. Right, so we're going to have 2 parameters here, right? So we're going to have velocity as a number, and boat type is a string. All right, we're going to return one thing, which is a Boolean, either true or false, that the boat can navigate the river. So you say see below. All right, and so I need to figure out how to store my data so that I can compare the speed and ship type and determine if the boat will float. So maybe an object, key-value pair with boat max velocity wouldn't be a bad idea for this. And then let's see here. Okay, so this I think would be a good start for this one. And so let's go ahead and console.log, or I guess we can just console.log velocity and boat type. Let's run it. All right, so I get 2 rowboat, 3 rowboat, 3 sailboat, 3 sailboat. All right, and I can see here in the test set they're giving me, even though it doesn't really mention it, this one's got some weird casing in it. So I'm probably going to want to send everything to either uppercase or lowercase just to make sure that I'm staying consistent there. And so, and also I'm going to want to create my object that holds both the ship type and their max velocity. So ship speeds, so we can call it max speeds. Right, and so we can say rowboat is has a max speed of 2. So if it hits 3, it crashes. Right, and a sailboat is 6, or it crashes, and then a ship is 14 or it crashes. All right, so we know if we do like we want to see what the max speeds are here. So instead of just console.logging boat type and velocity, let's go ahead and do this. And let's say max speeds and boat type, and we won't take a look at velocity for right now. All right, so this shows me that we're accessing these max speeds that we have saved in here for each ship type. All right, and so now we could say, no, let's see here. We'll just do it as a if-else statement for right now. So we could say if boat type is equal to rowboat, and we could return velocity is greater than actually we should probably do it the other way so we don't have to do anything crazy. So we could say max speeds equal to velocity. Right, and this is going to return true or false directly out of here. And so if this is greater than or equal to the velocity, that means that the velocity is less than the max speed or equal to the max speed. It would be true. We would expect it to float. So this first one, we would expect true. The second one, we would get false. So I would expect if I run this now, the first two should flip to true because we've built the case for it and it has. Right, so then the next one would be else if right, and I'm not worried about if someone puts in well, actually, I guess we'll keep it explicit for right now. So basically, if boat type ship right, so now get true, false. So again, sailboat is not lining up with anything in sailboat. So what we can do here for that is we can set it to downcase as soon as it comes into the function. Right, so we could say boat type is equal to boat type dot to lowercase. And that is putting everything to lowercase. We're signing in place, we get true for everything. So, and this would be something where you could solve this without the object, right? So like I could get rid of all of this and I could just hard code these values in here. But again, when we're doing like there's an okay way to do things and there's a better way to do things. And because we have so many similar values, and it's one thing if right, like with 3 boats, it doesn't really make a difference. But let's say there was 500 different ship types and we needed to know the max speed for each of them, right? Or if we added something additional in here, like where it was like max speed, length, and weight, right? And we needed to store that for each boat type and draw on that, then it's better to start storing your data in a neat, orderly way and make it ready to be basically extended out in the future, versus having to come back in and change how we do things basically at the logical level each time a new requirement comes in. All right, so any questions on how I solved this one, or anything else about life in general? I'm happy to answer it now.
Hey Charles, I got a question about objects. How
Yes.
does it, can you explain again, how does it know to pull rowboat? Like how, like I get that it's boat type, but is it just intuitive like that? Like it'll just search through the object until it finds, like if it finds something, it'll just return what the value is for that?
Yes. So remember, so objects do not have indexes, right? So like this isn't at the 0 and the 1. They have key value pairs. And so what we're doing right here is max speeds is our object, right? And we're saying for the key rowboat inside the max speeds object, give me the value. That's what this says right here, right? So we come in to max speeds, we find the rowboat key, and this becomes 2, right? And you know, I hadn't mentioned this yet in this class. Normally I get to it right about now. Has anyone ever been to pythontutor.com?
I have not.
Okay.
Negative.
This
Negative.
is a really useful site when you're first learning and you're doing functional programming. It becomes a lot harder to use this for troubleshooting when you start getting into the object-oriented parts of programming. But let's say I take this in here. Let me also, so I'm returning through all of these, get rid of this. So let me just grab this here real quick. All right, so Python Tutor handles a couple of different languages. Most importantly for you, it handles Python and JavaScript. And so you can put in a function, and anything that has a debugger can do this as well. Like Visual Studio Code has a debugger built into it. But this is a really easy way to do a visual execution of your code. So let me take this out of the console.log. Get rid of this. So we can visualize the execution here. And this code is saying that basically in 6 steps is how many steps it takes the computer to work through everything, right? And so the program loads up into memory, right? This gets saved into this function name, and the computer knows this is here, right? So all of this happens and gets read into memory. On line 17, it runs into a function call. So the computer says, oh, it's telling me to do something, right? And so it's telling me that this function has been called, canNav has been called, the velocity parameter is equal to 2, the boat type is equal to rowboat, and max speeds is undefined as of yet, right? So the next step, right, like it basically executed boat type is now equal to this. And so let me just back out of this here real quick, because if I do, whoops, come on. Sorry about that. Let me just wanted to do this real quick. All right, so we do this. So see how boat type is equal to rowboat. It executes this line of code. Now boat type is equal to rowboat, all lowercase. It hits the variable max speeds. Remember, it got hoisted up to the top, so it knows that it's there. It just doesn't know what the value is yet. Hits that 3rd line of code, says, okay, here's the object. Rowboat is 2, sailboat is 6, ship is 14. We're now going to go into our conditional logic. And because we've got rowboat, we're going to hit that first if statement. So we're going to step into that if statement, which is return max speeds, rowboat, is greater than or equal to velocity. So this is going to break down to true or false, right? And the return value is true. And so same thing, if we edit this code and let's change this to 45 and let's change it to ship. Right, same thing here. Load up the function in memory. There it is. Come in, execute the first line of code. Boat type is now ship, all lowercase. Load up the values in our object. We're going to go into our conditional logic. This is false. All right, so we check here. This is false. We're looking for ship. We hit this statement. This is now true. We step in here. And because velocity is 45, that is greater than this resolving down to 14. And whoops, we get undefined. Sorry, because I did not put a return there. That's my fault. But that should have resolved to false. Fix this here real quick. Return. Right, and there's our return false. This is really useful when you start getting into looping or you get into challenges where you have to do nested loops and things aren't happening the way that you expected them to happen. You can come in here and execute your code line by line and see what you're getting line by line and help you kind of track down where you made your mistake. So pythontutor.com, again, it supports for our purposes Python and JavaScript. And then when you're in Python, you're going to want to always use the Python 3 or greater, so 3.6, and very useful site while you're still learning. And I'll drop a link when I put all the links in for our class tonight. And did that answer your question about the object, Jesse?
Yeah, it just I just get stuck on the step where it's like where you tell it boat type is the key to know what it looks for. But I guess if I just had to hit the believe button or whatever,
Well,
it works.
And so because we're verifying that boat type is equal to rowboat, right? So remember when we were looking at in Python tutor, so if I comment these out on this first pass through, right? The variables are just placeholders. So this, when it gets executed by the computer, it sees this, right? And then this gets changed, right, to rowboat, and then is equal to rowboat to lowercase. And then when we say boat type, we're just saying is equal to rowboat, right? And then we're loading this in here and max speed's rowboat. I could technically leave this as boat type in here as well if I wanted to, right? So I could do something like this. Oops. Let's do. Right, because the only thing this can be by the time it gets in here is rowboat, right? Because it won't go in here unless boat type is equal to rowboat, and that's what I've put in down here. And so I was just making it a little bit more explicit, but this would be a perfectly acceptable way of doing it as well. Right? Like this won't screw anything up if I uncomment all of these. Oops, I didn't swap it back out up here. Velocity and boat type. All right, I still get all my true statements. So this is working the same way. And all this is with an object, right? So let object equal, right? So name, Charles, eye color, Hazel, oh, need a comma, right? And so all we're doing is saying, if I just say object and then give it the key, it's going to return the value, right? Charles, eye color, right? And so we could do something like this, right? So we say, right? Charles has hazel colored eyes, right? And so this is just how we access things inside the object, right? And remember, we have that built-in of index of, or no, I'm sorry, not index of has own property, right? So object has own property. So we can say things like, does this have its own property? So we can identify if that key is even in there, right? So because for something like this is small, but let's hypothetically say that there's 3 million keys in here, right? It's every whatever cataloged molecule in my body, right? And or what type of cell it is, and they each have their own individual name. So we've got this massive object, and we're wondering if something is in there. We can always do object has own property, and if we say name, right, that should return true. There's our true, so that means that there is a name property inside this object. And if I say hamburger, right, like that key does not exist, so it's false, right? And so that's just how we access values inside an object, is by identifying them by their key. And remember, keys have to be unique. It won't throw an error message if I have duplicate keys, right? But look down here when I run this, now it says Jeff has hazel colored eyes. And because there's no guaranteed order, if I press the button enough times, it may say Charles, but I've noticed with Replit, whatever the last named key is, but doesn't throw an error, doesn't tell me that there's duplicate keys in there, but it's only ever going to save one value.
Okay, yeah, I got it now. Thanks.
Cool. And I mean, you're going to, like, objects are super common, they're a little trickier. I know when I was solving functions that required the use of objects, it was definitely, it's the hardest data object in common data object in JavaScript to wrap your brain around. But you will also see it over and over and over again. So you're going to get tons of repetition as you go through code Platoon. All right. Any other questions in here? Okay. So what I would say is, and so I do want to do FizzBuzz next. This FizzBuzz is a little bit different than like the normal one, and mainly the I don't know why I clicked that. I want to show code. The big difference is with this one, they're asking you that you load it into an object. And so you're actually creating key value pairs for FizzBuzz. I believe 2 people said that they had solved it previously. I think, was it Ty and Loki said they'd solved it?
I did.
Not me.
It was me there.
Chad?
Yep.
Okay, team captains. So that way I just make sure I split you guys up so that you're not on the same group. Henry, Jesse, you've never solved it before?
No. I think, well, the name sounds familiar, but I don't remember when I did it.
Yeah, well, and so again, FizzBuzz is like one of the most famous interview questions of all time. So I'm going to split you up into a group of 2 and a group of 3, and I'm going to create the breakout room, and it's 7:53. So what I would say is take like a 4 or 5 minute break, get your break in, and I'm going to give everyone until, we'll say, I'll check with the groups at 8:20, but I'll give up to 8:30 on this one, so up to a full half hour on this one. If you and I'll check in at around 15-20 minutes to see how everyone's doing. If you finish it quicker, feel free to like please message me so we're not wasting time. And then for Chad and Ty, feel free to advise when people get stuck, but like try and just like guide the group. Don't just be like, bam, here's the answer. So that way everyone's getting a crack at it.
Cool.
Cool.
Awesome. So let me go ahead and pause the recording. All right, welcome back from the FizzBuzz challenge. So we're going to go over it in class now. It looked like both groups got a solution. So we'll go ahead and work through this, and mine should look somewhat similar to what either team came up with, but we'll discuss any discrepancies that we see here when we're done with this one. All right, so the FizzBuzz test is an interview question designed to help filter out some made-up number of programming job candidates. The text of the programming assignment follows something similar to this. Write a program that prints an object with a number of keys. The key is the number, and the value is either the number, fizz, buzz, or fizz buzz. But for multiples of 3, assign the key's value equal to fizz instead of the number, and for multiples of 5, assign the key's value to buzz instead of the number, and for multiples of both 3 and 5, assign the key's value to equal to fizz buzz. Otherwise, assign the key's value equal to the number. Right, and so when we look at the example over here on the right, we see 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is fizz, 4 is 4, 5 is buzz, 6, which is a multiple of 3, is fizz, 9 is fizz, 10 is buzz. When we get up here to 15, we hit our first fizz buzz, right? And this goes all the way up through 100. And we start at 1 instead of 0, so that's something to start thinking about right now as well. All right, and so let's see here. So we've got one parameter, which is going to be a number. We've got one return, which is an object with key value pairs of the key equal to number and the value equal to the number, fizz, buzz, oops, or fizz buzz. All right, so example. So first things first, I'm going to need to create an object that can hold all of my key value pairs. Loop. All right. That should be pretty good for our pseudocode. So let's go ahead and create our object. So we can say let result equal an empty object. And next we're going to need our loop. So we could say for let I equal 1. And again, because we don't need 0 in this instance, right? So there is no fizzbuzz for 0. We can start our count at 1. And we know that we want to count up to the number. So we can say I is less than or equal to num. And we're going to go by ones here. So we'll just say I plus plus. All right. Let's go ahead and make sure that we're counting. And just while we're building this, I'm going to drop this down to a more manageable number. Let's call this 25 to start with. All right. So what I'm hoping to see here at this stage is that I can count from 1 to 25. 1 to 25. So that's looking pretty good for me. I get an undefined because I'm not returning anything yet. I am going to return the result once I'm done with everything. If I do that right now, because I'm not adding anything to the object, I just get the empty object here at the end. All right. So how do we add something, or how do we add a key value pair to an object? Does anyone want to give me the syntax for that?
So if we're using result as objects, it would be result dot, I'm not sorry, I'll use bracket notation. So bracket, yeah, whatever the key is going to be equals whatever the value is going to be.
All right, well, we'll just see if we can get the key value pair in there with just the numbers for right now. And so we can get rid of that, and let's see what we get in our object when we do this. All right, so we get keys 1 through 25. That looks good to me. I know in the example, they don't have quotes around the numbers. That doesn't matter. These do, as far as JavaScript is concerned, these do get converted. The keys do get converted to strings. It's just the way it was written in the markdown file. So this is looking pretty good to me. So now we need to start figuring out how we can pick out our 3s, our 5s, and our multiples of 3 and 5. So, or 15s is another way to look at that. So we could say if, let's see here, I modulo or remainder 3 is equal to 0, instead of just result I being equal to I, we could then say fizz, right? So let's go ahead and we'll comment that out for right now. So we should just see, yep, 369. So there's our fizz. And then we could say else if I modulo remainder 5 equals 0, we can say result I equals buzz. Let's see if this builds out our object some more, right? So now our 5s are buzzes. 5, 10, 15 is a fizz. So we still haven't gotten our fizz buzz logic in there. 20 is a buzz. 25 is a buzz. All right. Did anyone run into some issues with their conditional logic if they started off with the 3 or the 5? Everyone got it right the first run through?
Well, we
Yeah,
started doing an and 3 and 5 as our first line, or 15.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
either way, we're using basically a 15, whether we did it in an expanded 3 and a double and 5, or if we did it just with a 15.
So do we think this is gonna work?
Probably won't get there because it's already answered it with the lower numbers.
Right, so we talked about this when we talked about conditional logic, right? The order that we put these in are important because it is always going to take the first true path, right? And so if I run into something that's evenly divisible by 15, it is also evenly divisible by 3. And so it's always going to default to here. We're never actually going to hit it down here. Right, so notice how I don't have any fizz buzzes in here, right? So even 15, which is also evenly divisible by 5, it still just says fizz, right? So like it hits that very first path, and that's what it's going to take. So to rearrange this, we have to be careful in what order that we put everything in. So we could take this right here. Right, so we'll do that. And you are absolutely right. So this could be 3, like I remainder 3 is triple equal to 0, and so the double ampersand I remainder 5, but this just cleans it up, right? We're using a little bit of math to make this a little bit easier to read. All right, so we drop this down. We can get rid of the buzz here. Let's go ahead and run this now. All right, and this looks better. So 15 gives me fizz buzz. Let's go ahead and bump this up to 45. All right, so 15, 30, 45, all got fizz buzz. And so now just for the last step, we can take this back out of here, throw this in. All right, 1, 2, fizz, 4, buzz, fizz, 7, 8, fizz, buzz, 11, fizz, 13, 14, fizz buzz. So this is looking pretty good to me. All right, so we can crank this back up to 100.
So you were saying the output example is not with quotations because of the markdown, but let's presume they wanted it without. Could we use a built-in to clean up our object before it displays so it makes all of those integers or does something to remove some quotes?
No, because object keys are strings in JS. And it's
Key names must adhere. Okay.
right, and
Yeah.
it's basically, even though this looks like like I said, it's not worth. I honestly, I don't know if you can clean this up or not. I think I've tried in the past. I wasn't able to. That's why, it's like I said, even if it doesn't look like it, JavaScript treats it like a string. And the oh, what was I gonna say? I'll see if I can find the article that I read on this previously. I'll drop it in the links if I can find it. But basically, it's not worth the effort of trying to clean it up. Like, this is the valid solution. And I don't even know if you can clean it up, quite honestly, because
Not enough juice in that squeeze.
right. Well, and it's because you can see here, like, we're not pushing it as a string, right? Like, these are numbers. I is a number, but it's still being treated as a string. And I'm trying to think if this is also, let me run this in, where did you run off to? There we go. So let me just grab this, put this here, and do node add.js. All right, yeah, so it does do it here as well. Right, but you can see like over here, like it is showing it as an actual number, and for whatever reason, it just does it this way when we construct it that way. Like I said, I'll dig a little bit into it and see if I can find that article that it talked about it, because I'm pretty sure I've had that asked to me previously. But I don't think there was a way to clean it up. But if there is, we'll talk about it tomorrow. So it's about 8:50 right now. Were there any other questions for the evening? About anything Guillermo had, Code Platoon related, challenge related, this challenge, outside challenges, anything. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
So I had one, Charles, just real fast for the, if we wanted to, and this is, I could probably Google it and find it, but just to ask you, it's faster. It's, if I wanted to use a switch case for these, instead of the if statement, can you put conditional logic into the switch case, or does it have to be I equals a number? Can you put I, module 15?
You cannot put conditional logic into the switch case. And the reason being is that because it resolves itself and the case becomes true or false. And then it's looking for the case true or false.
Okay.
Right. So like if you do switch, right, and you say like I right, like if we say I and then come in here and do like case I is module 3 is triple equal to 0. It's literally this, the computer then interprets that as case true or case false. Right. So that's one of the limitations of switch statements, is that you can't put the conditional logic in there.
I think you can, if I'm not misunderstanding it. If you do switch parentheses true.
Right, but then you only have, well, so if you do switch true, so if you do switch true, you've hard coded the value true in there, and that's all there is it's just true over and over and over again.
Let me post what I got to Slack, and then, because I think there might be a way. It's triple quotes to do.
Yep. Three backticks.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, Command V, and I'll send that to you.
Take a look at this.
You want to remove line 42, or it's going to error on you.
Oh, yeah, you are correct. Huh, I guess you can do it this way then. I've never seen it done this way before. So switch true, value equal I. So yes, you can do it that way. this, so this is a correct answer, but the only thing I would say is, like, as I'm reading this, this is confusing to me. Like, I don't know why this true works here. Right. And so I would prefer to see it this way, but you could definitely do it this way and get the right answer, it appears. So congratulations on that one. That's something new. Because I'm pretty sure I've been asked to do that before, and I get tripped up around what needs to go into there, because you can't have any, it's like you can't have any conditional logic inside the switch. But feeding the true straight through seems to be hardwiring it where it's falling through. But I wonder what happens if we do this. That's interesting. Yeah, and I don't know why. We're just saying that this is true. And so we're entering in the switch statement every time because we've got true, and we're looking for the one of these that resolves to true. So I guess that makes sense. So yeah, nice job. I've never seen FizzBuzz solved with a switch statement before. So I will, if you're okay with it, I will leave this in the solution that I'll paste to class then. So that way everyone can see a copy of it.
No, absolutely. That's why I posted it to Slack too. I mean, I'm learning, and as I go through this, I've found some peculiar ways that I've kind of fumbled together that work for reasons I have yet to learn enough to understand why they work. But the switch one was interesting.
That took me a second because it was, like I said, I'm not used to looking at it that way, but I guess I get it now, is that we're hardwiring true. And so we're starting to fall through the different cases, and we're looking for the one that will resolve for true each time. And so that's why that works. So today I learned. Cool.
Charles,
Yes.
I was going to say, Loki also in our breakout session, we did it the way you did it. But then Loki had a great way to do it using an array. I don't know, Loki, if you want to put that up as well, but I'm going to study that tomorrow, probably all day. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah, I'll post it. I'll post it right now for Charles to look at it too, because again, it's another one of those me just kind of scrapping stuff together and not really fully appreciating or understanding it, but still studying it like you're going to study it tomorrow. And me too. Because there's piecing it together and using some of these built-ins that I don't fully understand yet to get there.
Yeah,
but
and that's the so there's always yeah, I see you're using the from array, the built-in. So to create your array, and then yeah, using a callback function with your conditional logic in there. So that's definitely another way to solve it outside of an object using an array. I mean, sometimes FizzBuzz can be used. I mean, like I've seen it where like you're just console.logging it, or you're just doing it as a string, like all as one string. So this is definitely another way to solve it. Like if the solution was asking to do it as an array, and you're using the from array basically to create, like in substitute for a for loop. Like you could also do this with a like a for loop, a while loop, different ways to tackle this. So this would be another way to do it. Again, I would avoid built-ins, and it's good. I'm glad you solved it the other way too. Because it's kind of like if anyone's had to do a land nav course where they just give you a map and a compass and send you out into the hills. And so doing something with a loop that you're writing by hand versus using a built-in is the map and compass way versus using GPS, right? And if you can use GPS without understanding how to read a map and how to use a compass, but if your GPS ever breaks and you never learned how to use your map and compass, then you're out of luck, right? And so when I show these examples in class, right, like a lot of these could be solved in built-ins, like even the like I said, the last day we're going to do that employee data, and that's a good like 15 to 30 lines of code depending on how you solve it. I can show you a built-in solution that technically solves it in one line of code, and the code is almost unreadable. Like you have no idea what's going on with it because you're just like stacking. I think it takes like 10 or 15 built-ins, just stacked one right after the other to get it done, versus reading something that you can come back at and read and understand. And so that's why I say always focus on trying to solve it with like a for loop or a while loop first until you get really comfortable with those. But yeah, and alternative solutions, I'm all for them, but just make sure like if you're using built-ins that you also understand how to solve it without those built-ins. All right, and that puts us at 9 o'clock. So I'm going to pause the recording.